Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, you have my mid-year freakout tag video. One of two tags, book tags, video tags that I do every year, or try to do every year. And it is a really good time to stop and reflect on your reading for the year thus far. It is a little bit difficult for someone like me who reads as many books as I do, because I had 230-ish books to go through. That's a lot of books. So that didn't make it easy, especially when it comes to some of the later questions, which I'll get into in just a moment. I didn't print out the list of questions, and I don't know who the original creator of this tag was, but there are so many videos using these questions that you can find with the simple Google search, YouTube search, etc. So the first question is, best book you've read this year. I have 3 books to talk about. I believe they are all really close to each other, like maybe a half point difference on one item on CAWPILE. The highest rated book that I have is the first book I read this year, and that is A Problem from Hell by Samantha Power. This book has had a huge impact. It is fascinating, it is heartbreaking, but it is also very helpful to understand what's going on in the world, and it gave great context to the ongoing war and genocide in Gaza. It's very hard-hitting, it's tough to deal with in a lot of different places, but I said when I read this that I thought it was going to be my #1 nonfiction book of the year. As of right now, it's my #1 book for the year. I have 2 other books that I'm going to briefly talk about who were rated, I rated just below that. Another one of those was one that I read in January, and that is Minor Detail by Adanya Shibley. This is the book that came into a lot of people's radar, onto a lot of people's radar after the author was told, don't come to this book prize, festival, etc., where she was up for getting an award because we don't want any controversy. This was early on in October, and a lot of people were rightly outraged, going, what did she do? She just happened to be Palestinian. They were having this backlash against her. And so a lot of people picked this book up, including myself. It's not a typical book that I would read. It's short. It plays with the way things are told, especially in the first half. There's 2 perspectives in here. The first perspective is an Israeli soldier who was participating in the initial conquest of this area. It's written in a way that could get annoying, but focused on really incredible minor details and this delineation of all the like daily things that you wouldn't think to put in a novel, in a novella. And then the second half had a woman who was investigating an incident that happened in the first half and also included those minor details, but it shifts from third person to first person between those 2 perspectives. And the ending got me. I can't really say anything else. This should be a modern classic. This should be something that a lot of people read. A lot of people need to experience this story and learn more about these situations. I've had a lot of good books that I've read this year and other 5 stars, but I didn't have another book that really stuck out to me until just this month. And that's Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I believe, if I remember correctly, I put A Man Called Ove on my 2023 best books list. Fredrik Backman, he's gonna come up in a little bit. He knows how to write. He knows how to use an economy of words to tell the story. And what makes it even more impressive is that this is translated. So whoever does the translation also does an excellent job, but they're working with brilliant source material. This book, the setup is you have Beartown, which is a very small town in Sweden. You could say the only thing going for it is their junior level hockey team who has reached the playoffs and could possibly, and that would bring a lot of good things to the area, and they have this major star player. And there is an incident that happens after this team wins the semifinal where that player essays the daughter of the general manager. And you see what happens, what unfolds in that town and how people respond. And this does not have any primary characters, I would say. It flows smoothly between so many different perspectives. There were so many times when I was reading this, because I read this on my trip to Chicago for a half marathon with my mom. And there were many times I would stop and I would read her portions of this. And it just is so impactful and such a gut punch. I don't have words to explain how deeply this impacted me and made me think about a lot of stuff and how narrative is explored. So this is phenomenal. I've since gone on to read book 2 in the series. I don't think it needed to be a series, but and book 2 did not quite live up to this. It was a 4.5 stars, not a 5 stars. But there were times in book 2 that had me nearly crying. Fredrik Backman is a brilliant writer. Next we come to best sequel. And I have been trying to work my way through different series this year, but surprisingly, the best sequels that I have read, I literally just read this past weekend. And that's book 2 and 3 in the Murderbot series. I read Rogue Protocol, which is book 2, and Artificial Condition, which is book 3. I don't have them physically. I need to get them. I need them in my library. I'm not usually one for short fiction, but the way that Martha Wells is able to tell these stories, they are clearly encapsulated in each novella. But the story is continuing throughout the novellas. And it doesn't feel when you finish one novella that you're missing part of the story. You know that there's more going on, but she tells a complete story in this episodic way, and I just love the character of Murderbot. Next we have books. See, I don't even know if I'm going in order because I didn't write out the questions. I just stacked up books or sticky notes in some sort of order to help me with this. So I believe the next question is books that you've wanted to read but haven't gotten to yet. And so for that, I have 3 books physically. These are 3 new releases that I'm fairly certain may be on the list. I realized I just said fairly certain may be on the list, but we have Feybound, The Silverblood Promise. I'm probably going to have to return this before, it's a 14-day loan. So I need to return this, but I'm going to try to check it out again. The wait for the audiobook is really long. That's just one I really want to read personally. I don't think it's going to be on the list. And then we have Fate Inked in Blood. These 2 have a possibility of being on the fantasy list, but also on the romantasy list. I don't know which list it's going to be on or if there are even going to be 2 lists, but these are books that I own. This I have for an Our Fantasy Bingo. I'm not sure if I have this one for one of those prompts, but these are ones that I want to get to. Then we have new releases that I'm eagerly anticipating, and I don't do a good job with keeping up with what's coming up, but there is one book that I am eagerly anticipating, and I don't know how quickly I'm going to get to it, but there is no doubt in my mind that right away, as soon as it's published, I'm purchasing Wind and Truth, which is book 5 in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Hands down, I'm getting that book. The next question asked which were the biggest disappointments. I think one of the things that has helped me this year in my approach to books is that I'm not approaching them, putting them up on a pedestal and saying this is going to be a 5-star read, I'm going to absolutely love this, but trying to keep my expectations about midway. And so for that reason, as I was scrolling through all of my reviews, and I have a lot to go through, I know that I've written the word disappointed in various reviews, but even when I got to those and I thought about it and I was like, it was mildly disappointing, but it wasn't a huge disappointment. It wasn't anything that stood out to me. So I don't really have an answer for that question. Then there's the books that were the biggest surprise. And speaking of how I set my expectations, Based on last year's SESL list, my expectations weren't medium. They were down a bit. This year, if you've seen my SESL videos, they blew it out of the water. And especially these two books and several others, Playing the Turnaround, We Were the Fire, they blew my mind with how good they were and how much they affected me, impacted me, and I'm so glad that they were on the list. Next we have new favorite author, and that's where Fredrik Backman comes back in. Yes, I read one of his books for the first time last year, but this year I have read 3 more. I've read Beartown, I've read Us Against You, which is book 2, and I've also read My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. I also have Anxious People on my 24 and 24 list. Even though Us Against You was a 4.5 star and My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry was a 4 star, there is just something about Fredrik Backman's writing that I absolutely love. And I will leave the Gush Fest there because I talked about that plenty when I was talking about Beartown. Next we have the question that most people are just like, I don't really get fictional crushes. And that's either your new fictional crush. I don't get crushes on fictional characters. There are ones that I really, really like, but I don't get these. Then we have new favorite characters in general. Okay, I love Murderbot, and I love the entirety of Spy Family. Spy Family is just amazing. I absolutely love Lloyd, aka Twilight, Yor, Anya, Bond. They're just the whole cast, with the exception of Yor's brother, is just phenomenal. Favorite characters. I know for a fact that there are now going to be questions that I miss on this mid-year freakout tag because my next sticky notes, one says Beartown 2 and the other says Spy Family. I don't know what questions those were asking. I've talked about those. So, oops. I'm just going to answer the questions that I remember. I really should get better at notes for these videos. Second to last question is, what is the prettiest book that you've gotten in your library? Hands down, I knew which one this was, even though I've gotten a lot of special editions this year. It's Fathom Folk, because we've got this. And in that video, I about lost it when I saw this cover. Prettiest book I've gotten from a BookBox subscription ever. I am so nervous to start reading it because I desperately want to like it. And lastly, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? Are there any books that I need to read? No. Am I going to read probably 150, 200 more books this year? Yes. Is that completely unreasonable? Also, yes. I guess the ones that I have to read are the ones on my goal list, which will be the rest of my Buzzwordathon books, the rest of my 24 in 24, the rest of the series that I want to start this year. And potentially my Our Fantasy bingo list, even though that goes into March of 2025. So there you go. There's my 2024 mid-year freakout tag. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.